Okay, so yesterday we were finishing up Rabbi Kiva Shita and what he does with all the different pratim in the pasuk by Nazir and by Kohen Gadol. So yesterday the Gemara taught us the reason why it has to list off la'aviv v'la'imai is because one without the other. If we would say aviv, you would think that a person could be metama to his mother because we know for sure it's his mother. And if it says imai, you would think that maybe a person could be metama to the father because their mishpacha goes based on their father, and therefore we need both. And then from the Al Kol Nafshis Meis that it says by Nazir, Rabbi Kiva learns Al Kol is Lafuki Rechaikim, Meis is Lafuki Kroivim. Even Kroivim, a Nazir is prohibited to be matama too. And then we had Nefashos to tell us that even if there's only one Revi'is Dam that's accumulated from two different Mesim, that's enough to prohibit a Nazir from becoming Tomei too. And that was under that sugya. And then we got to the Mishnah, which is really going to start a sugya of Tahiris. So the Mishnah gave us a list of a whole bunch of items that create tumas, mace, even ba'oihel, and then the Mishnah listed off one item, etzem kisoyra, that's not metame ba'oil, but it is metame b'maga, and all those things will be metame the nazir and be soiser his minion, and they'll have to start over again after he's matar himself and he brings the karbonis. We learned two notable exceptions to the rule of when the Nazir is Tamei Tumas Meis, he Tzoyser is Naziris. There's two exceptions. A is a Roiva Akava Tzomais, although it's Matamehim Tumas Meis, it will not destroy his Naziris until there's actually a Chatzi Kava of Tzomais. And the Roiva Lug of Dam will be enough to be Matameh someone Tumas Meis, but a Nazir's minion isn't destroyed, isn't disqualified unless he's metama with a chati like the dam, which is double the normal shear. We learned that if you goyris in our Mishnah the way we are goyris, where the Mishnah says al ameis the al kazayis from the mace, and that's how a mayor was goyris. It would be shver if a kazayis min ameis causes tumah. Surely an entire mace does. And that's why Rabbi Yehuda didn't want to listen to Sumchis, who was bringing this girsa of the Mishnah to him. So Rabbi Yosy came along and said, we can't just ignore Rabbi Meir's Torah just because Rabbi Meir is not here and Rabbi Yehuda doesn't want to engage in it. We have to explain what is the chiddush of al mace if we already know that a kazayis from the mace is matama. And Rabbi Yosy answered, if you have a very premature fetus that doesn't even have a kazayis basar, but since it's a complete mace, it will also be matama. That was the chiddush of that line of the Mishnah. So although we've answered your mayor's girsa, there are still other kashas on the Mishnah, such as the Mishnah says on one aver of a mess, or even aver menachai, that will be matama somebody, and they'll have to start recounting. So once again, why do you need a pasuk that says al hameis? So the Gemara said, like Rabbi Yochanan said, if you have a nefel who's not even developed enough, that there's tendons and sinews and muscles and meat, nevertheless, if it's a complete mace, it will be matama. Rava tells us the chiddush of al Abram Menu is a l'roiv binyanoi or l'roiv binyanoi. If it's roiv of the structure of the skeleton, or if it's roiv of the amount of bones, she'ein bahen roiv atzamos, even though there's not a roiva of atzamos, if it's roiv binyanoi and roiv binyanoi, it will still be b'mitama. which brought us to this line, al kazayis meis, al kazayis netzel, and that's where we're up to now. Good morning, Dubi. I'm sorry? No, I have. Oh, thank you very much. Sometimes I come early. And then I can make my own coffee. Okay, so we're up to about 10 lines on the top of Duna Amud Aleph. It's a very short Gemara today. It's just a little bit of foreign material that we're not used to. So we learned that on the zayis of netzel, and netzel we said is liquid moisture oozing that comes out of a mace. But that's not exactly accurate. Zok to Gemara, Beizeu netzel. What is this netzel? That the Mishnah says a kazayis of it is matame. It's basar ameis shekarash. It's basar ameis that dissolved. Umoyel shertziach. And the liquid that comes out of a mace that was cooked up. Now, the halacha is that the basar of the mace itself, if it dissolved, it will be matama. But what if there were secretions from the mace, like saliva or phlegm? Those would not be matama machmas tumas mace. So, frank the Gemara, hey chadami, what do you mean basar mace shekarash? So you see it's gelled. Ilema de lo yadinan dididehu. If we don't know that this is basar min hameis, there's a little bit of a shine on the Rishonim how to learn this. I'm going to learn like Tosfos does. Ilema de lo yadinan dididehu, which Tosfos teaches on the first intermediate line. Is it dissolved meat? Or is it other secretions? So if we don't know what this is, kikarash might have it. What does it make a difference to me if it dissolves? It could be either one. It could be keicha v'neyu, which is not tummy, or it could be basar that is tummy. Ella diadinan dididehu. If you knew that it was meat that dissolved, well then avagav the loikarish. It doesn't make a difference if it dissolved, if it didn't dissolve, if it, no matter what happened, if we know that it's basar or mace, of course it's matam. So what is this? It seems like there's a litmus test. If it's shekarash, if it cooks up or if it gels, that'll be a sign that it's basar. How do you know that? Where do you see the difference? Omer B'Yirmiyah Bistam. Going back to a case where we didn't know if it was keicha v'nei or if it was actually meat that dissolved. Ikarash moyel, if it gelled up, then it's for sure moyel, or if it dissolved. Loy karash, if it didn't, then dilma keicha v'nei. So in fact, the fact that it gels tells you that it's basar mace. Let's see, Tosfos. We know that this substance came out of the mace. We don't know if the secretion is meat that dissolved, or if it was actually just his saliva or thing like that. So kirish is the litmus test. If it was kirish, then vade moilhu haba be basar mace. That for sure comes from basar mace. You like kirish, keicha b'neihu. So I'm pretty sure kirish means actually to dissolve. Does the article teach kirish as dissolve? Okay, kirish means to congeal. Okay, so if the liquid congeals, it's proof that it's from the basar mace. Same for the litmus test of resiach. If it cooks up, the hella resichos, if it cooks up and it creates steam, vade moyel haba machmas mehameis, it's for sure juice of the mace. Who bezeu netzel? That's netzel that will be mitama. Lo resiach, if it doesn't cook up, then keicha v'neyahu, then it's just other secretions that don't cook up, don't steam up. It's a litmus test to know if some type of gelled material, some type of material, if it's actually basar or mace, or if it's just keichai v'nei. Okay, gewaltig. Now, there's one big shaila from the Keren Orah. It says if If it wasn't Karish, Dilma, maybe it's Kecha B'Neyu. So we don't know for sure that it's Kecha B'Neyu. It's only Dilma, right? Well, aren't there rules when it comes to Suffolk Tumah? If it's a Suffolk, if this is a mace or not a mace, is not that's Suffolk Tumah. And there's a rule. Suffolk Tumah Rishus HaRabim, if this occurs in Rishus HaRabim, it's Svekoi Tahar. And if Suffolk Tumah occurred in Rishus HaYachid, it's Svekoi Tameh. So why does the Gemara assume that Dom Kecha B'Neyu, so you don't have to be makbid? And it's a Suffolk. You should follow the normal rules of Suffolk. So the Keren Neuer wants to build a huge chiddush from here, that the only time we have the rules of Suffolk Tumah B'Shus HaYachid, Svekoi Tameh, and Suffolk Tameh B'Shus HaRabim Svekoi Tar, that's when you have a known Tumah, and the question really is, did it touch something or not? That's when you follow those rules. But when you don't even know if a substance is Tumah at all, there you wouldn't say Suffolk Tameh B'Shus HaRabim Tar and Suffolk Tameh B'Shus HaYachid Svekoi Tameh, it remains a Suffolk. Boi minay Abaye mirabba. Abaye asked a shaila from Rabbah. Yesh netzel labehema, or a netzel labehema. This stuff that oozes out of a behema, does it also have the same din tumah as a tumas nevela? So let's see. Toishvis. Yesh netzel labehema, kazayis min nevela shenirkav me'ela. The kazayis of nevela rotted, binimuach, and it dissolved. So it's dissolved solution. That's the leftover of the meat. Will it have the same halacha as a fresh piece of nevela? Of course, because it's not tumas meis, it's just tumas nevela. So this is a shayla that has nothing to do with Maseches Nazir, but we got into Tumah V'Tahira, so we're going off on a tangent. Like our Mendel Kaplan told us, that why is it when the Gemara runs into a small halacha relative to Tumah V'Tahira, the Mishnah tends to go off on a whole tangent and starts discussing for bletter foreign subjects like Tumah V'Tahira? It's because if there would be a Meseches that was only Tumah V'Tahira, nobody would learn it nowadays because it's not so relevant. So in order for Chazal to get us to learn those Mishnayos and those halachas, Chazal interspersed them throughout Shas, where we will pick it up. That's what Mendel told us. Mendel Kaplan Tzal, my Rebbe in First Shabbos Melech, she was a Talmud of Rabbi Chanan Wasserman. Okay, so that's the Shaila. Yesh netzel lebehema or ein netzel lebehema. Do we say that the juice that comes out of a behema, the dissolved meat, would that have the same status as basar nevela? What's the Shaila? Mi amrinon. On the one hand, do we say Ki gemiri netzel the asimi adam, aval the asimi behema loy? When we had this halacha, I guess we learned Kabbalah that we learned that the netzel also is tamei, just like the meat that it came from. Maybe we learned that dafke by adam, but not by behema. Adam aloishna, or maybe this halacha even applies to behema. Zok to Gemara, hanicha, this whole shaila would not be relevant. Now, once something becomes netzel, there's no question about it. It's spoiled, it rotted, and it dissolved. The question is, up until what point is an avela tamei? If you hold it's ad lager, meaning an avela is only tamei up until the point that a goy would eat it. But once it's spoiled to the point that a goy would no longer eat it, it doesn't have anything tumah. If you hold like that, then for sure netzel has no impact on avela, because by the time it's netzel, it's spoiled, and a ger couldn't eat it. So if you learn that tumah chamura ad lager, meaning a tumas nevela, is only tamei up until the point where it's no longer edible to a ger, but tumah kalas, tumas meichel, which are much lesser tumas, rishon, sheni, shlishi, is ad lakelev, that remains an oichel until it's nisal mechilas kelev. Shapir, we don't even have a shaila because it doesn't make a difference whether netzel is relevant to a behemoth or not. Netzel, by definition, is not royal achilas adam, and therefore it's no longer tamei al tumas nevela. Elamadam or tumah chamura ad lakelev. Behold that tumas nevela remains tame up until it's spoiled, that even a dog wouldn't eat it. Ma ikla maimer, what is the halacha? Is netzel like the meat or not? Tashma, the Gemara wants to bring a raya from an unusual type of tumah. There's one type of tumah that's not like any other tumah at all, and it's called tumas nevelas oiftar. You have a kosher bird, and the bird died without shchita. The halacha is it's a nevela, but if you touch it, you're not tamei. And the nevelas oiftar is only mitame in a very unusual fashion. The beis abliya, if you eat it as you're swallowing it, you become tamei. That's the only way to become tamei from a nevelas oiftar. So what happened if you took the meat of a nevelas oiftar and the mechubar, you dissolved it in the fire? There's a piece of fat, you dissolved it. The halacha is tamei. You're still going to be tamei. B'chama, but if you dissolved it in the sun, then tahar, then it will be tahar. So let's think about it. Bisol kedaitach, that netzel, we have to change the gears over here. Bisol kedaitach, that netzel of a behema is like a behema. So therefore, afilu b'chama nami, even if it dissolved in the chama, even though it's not roy lachilas adam, but pashtus, it's still roy lachilas kelev, and therefore, even if you dissolved it in the sun, it should also be tamei. Zakti Gemara, no. Amos mamchalei. When something dissolves in the sun, when does it dissolve? When does it dissolve? At what point does it dissolve? Basur das ruach. After it's completely rotted out. Basur das ruach b'chama. After it's totally rotted out from sitting in the sun, full of maggots already. Kivan the asrach chaval yofer. Once it's so rotten from the sun, it's not even royal achilas kelev anymore. And since it's not even royal achilas kelev anymore, even if natal behemoth kibehema, but everybody agrees that it loses its status of nevela if it's no longer royal, even achilas kelev. That the dissolved meat, the nimuach meat of a nevela is also matama mishum nevela, just like the dissolved meat of a human is matama mishum eis. That's right. That's right. So let's see Toshus. That's a good question that you're asking. Hemchei ba'ar tamei gab nevelas iftar misanya hemchei l'shumen shall nevelas iftar ba'ar tamei mishum hachi lo nifsal milachal lekelev k'mekar. It won't be nifsal. The derech lahamchei shumen ba'ar. It's normal to dissolve fat and make it into oil. That's a normal thing, especially now Pesach time, and it's smalt, right? But if it's b'chama tar, the kishinemuch b'chama hu masriach, it gets fashimmelt, gets smelly. Michoy mashemesh, from the heat of the sun, vein royal achilas adam, and we're soon going to learn. The Gemara tells us the maskana that it's not even royal achilas behem. If it's royal achilas behema, then you'd have a raya. Then you'd have a raya that netzel is matama. So the Gemara is asking. The Gemara is asking if you hold that netzel is matama. So then, even if it became for shimmelt in the sun, it should also be matama. Elamai netzel is not matama. Correct. But what's we make fragen is if netzel is not matama, so how come him chayu ba'ar? So then how come him chayu ba'ar is tummy? If you're going to bring a raya from our brisa that netzel is not tummy, so then how would you explain why him chayu ba'ar is tummy? But still netzel, it's still dissolved, and if it's dissolved, we want to bring a raya that if it's dissolved, it won't be tummy. It's dissolved. It's dissolved meat. So Toshus asked that kasha. Umeshani emes kamam chulubas the kamam chulubas the ashram mikachama mavish l'moid davelek afro dafla kelev aniroyu loydami l'datzal behema shanim chul b'loy chama ro akati l'kelev. Oh, Toshus doesn't speak it out. I saw someone who speaks out that when you do it ba'or, that could be, since it's the regular way to do it, it would be considered. Let me see. I thought I saw somewhere who speaks about this beferish. I forgot where I saw, but someone does speak out. Let me see if the Rosh says it. Because in the having the Gemara, we wanted to bring a raya that Neitzel is not matama, so why would it be matama if he was ba'ar? If you did a ba'ar. So let me see what it says over here. I don't remember, but someone speaks out. I'll have to look it up again. Does the article speak anything out? Notes? Because on the side of the Gemara wanted to say that Neitzel is not matama, because if it's imcheyu b'chama, it won't be tamei. So then, how do they explain the first part of the brayse? Why imcheyu ba'ar would be tamei? It doesn't matter if it's edible. Once it's no longer meat, it's dissolved, then it's called nitzel. And if nitzel isn't matama, on the side of nitzel is not matama, why would it be tamei? No, it's the actual meat dissolving. Right. But he doesn't ask why that's not netzel, because netzel is also fit for human consumption. Okay, let's see the Gemara weiter. Let's see the Gemara weiter. Tanan Hosam, we learned brayse. Kol hanitzuk tahar. So the halacha is, what if I have a dish that's tummy, and I'm pouring water into that dish? So that means the water pouring is making a connection between what's in the dish and what's in the cup that I'm pouring. Is that considered a chibur, so that the liquid in the cup that I'm pouring will also become tamei, because now it's touching the tumah because of the pour. The pour connects them. So the Mishnah says, or the Brayse says, kol nitzuk tahar. Nitzuk is not chibur. When you're pouring A into B, the fact that there's a steady stream of liquid going from A to B, that does not connect the two. And if the bottom is tamei, the top will not be tamei. But there's an exception. Huch midvash hazifim batzapichas. And these items are a honey and the actual pieces of the honeycomb. Let's see, Toisvis. Dvash hazifim is zaf shebezayfin. It's very, very thick. Why is it called zifin? Because they forge it. Since it's so thick, they're able to dilute it with wine. So it's called forged honey, because there's wine diluted into it, and you're able to dilute it with wine because it's so thick. And the other one was tzapachas, and Toshus tells us that it means, not everybody holds like this, but it means you take the honey right out of the beehive, mixed with wax, and that makes it much, much thicker. So since it's a very, very thick mixture, it's not like water that pours. It's very thick. Right. There's others who learn that it's mixed with flour. It's correct. It's some type of flour mixture that you've seasoned with honey. That's right. So, but whatever it is, a very thick mixture, and since it's a very thick mixture, we'll say that will actually create a connection. Now, there's another feature of a very thick mixture. A very thick mixture, sometimes when you stand the cup up, if it's really thick, it'll actually pull back into the cup because it's so sticky. So part of it will break off and fall down, but part of it, even something that came out of the cup, will pull back into the cup. That's an important feature of these sticky things. So we have dvash, azifim, and tzapichas, we say are nitzuk chibur. What about b'sham afam mikveshal grisen? What about if you have some type of a dish that's made out of a porridge made out of ground beans? That's also considered chibur b'shel pul. Why? This is that feature that when you stop pouring, even some of the thing that you poured that's already out of the keli will get pulled back in because it sticks. So Beis Shammai holds even mikveh shel rishon v'shapol, which is less thick than the honey that we mentioned. Everybody agrees the honey that we mentioned is thick enough, and we say needs a chibur. Beis Shammai says even this looser thing, but it's also pretty thick, even that you have nitzuk chibur. Boy, Rabbi Bar Chama. So Rabbi Bar Chama asked us a shayla. Yesh nitzuk lo'oichlin, or ein nitzuk lo'oichlin. Do you say nitzuk by oichlin? And Tosfos explains. You had food, it wasn't liquid, it was solid, and you dissolved it. You heated it up and it got dissolved. And you poured a dissolved solid into oichlin tmeim. And the question is, according to the Rabbanon, do we say that whatever's up above is also going to be tamei, because it's connected through the fact that it's being poured in to the tummy meichel. So boy, yesh nitzuk la'oichlin or ein nitzuk la'oichlin. Mi amrinon. Do you say mishum de ispuhudidi v'hanu laspudidi? Do you say that the whole reason why the Rabbanon agreed that the honey type of mixtures that we discussed, why are they considered chibur? Because they have ididi, meaning they have things that pull it back. It's almost like strandy, but when you straighten up the cup that you're pouring, it'll actually pull some of the honey back into the cup. That doesn't exist if you're dissolving a piece of fat. That's much looser. It will not get pulled back. So if the reason for the Rabbanon is because it gets pulled back, well then there's no nitzuk la'oichlin because it doesn't get pulled back. Or maybe it's not because it pulls back. Maybe the Rabbanon doesn't hold to that. That svar of pull back is Beis Shammai svar. The Chachamim hold it's because it's a very thick mixture, and that's why it's connected. And even this fat that was dissolved also has a certain thickness to it, and therefore we should also say nitzuk chibur by this dissolved fat. Amar Rabbi Toshma. Rabbi wants to bring a right. You had chaylev hameis that was a full kezayis, which is what's required to make tumas oil. And now you started to dissolve it. Tamei, it remains tamei. Why? Because imagine you have a kezayis of fat. Once it's dissolved, the dissolved part is no more. If it drips off, it's no more connected. But if it started off as one solid piece, even if it dissolves and now it's sitting as a liquid, we still say your full kazayis is intact and there's still tumas meis. But what happens if it was hayim afurid? You didn't have one piece of fat that's a kazayis. You had 2 or 3 pieces of fat that combined, they were a kazayis. V'tichai, and now you heated them up and you made them into a liquid, tar, that will be tar. Because nitzuk, we're contracting because nitzuk is not chibur. No, I'm sorry. No, it's because it's 3 different pieces. I don't know if you're mechaber 3 different pieces. Let's see Tosfos. Chaylev hameis shu shalom. Pirush kazayis shalom. Why not? Because ice when the race is matam boil. So let's see Tosfos inside. Chaylev meishu shalom pirush kazayis shalom. V'hetichai tamei hetichai kamay chitchai, meaning shem chayu ba'ar, you dissolved it in the fire. Tamei kedem meikara, that kazayis retains its status of tuma. The meikara hayu boy kazayis shalom. Originally there was a full kazayis. V'adayin yeshnai kulei biyachid kedem mefarish b'zamach. And that kazayis, although it's now liquid, it's still all one kazayis. It could be because nitzuk is chibur, and even though now liquid separates, But when liquids touching each other, it's all considered one mass. Hilchach afilu ki tichoi, afilu shem loy hayu mechuber biyachad oy nitza. Even though it's only connected because of the liquid. The imishum shall nifred me oilam zemizeh kidmafarish b'shenuya, or because maybe they were never separated. But hayu mafur, what if originally you only had piruin shel chelav ameis? You had individual bits of chelav ameis. Shloi haya meikar zayis shalom that were not originally a zayis. Avagav de tichin ba'or. Right, it was not matama. Yeah, but it's not matama ba'oil. But avagav the tichin ba'or and nasa kol chaticha achas tar. Now, when you melt it down, now they all form into one liquid. Nevertheless, the bride says it's still tar. When if it's naturally connected, that creates tumas meis. But if a person makes things connect, like by dissolving them and they become one liquid, that's not a chibur legabi creating tumas meis. The kodim sheitichu loyhaya kazayis mechuber biyachad, and therefore v'loyhaya metame hanegeh b'miktas or yafilo hanegeh b'kuloi leman delesle negeh v'chayzer v'negeh. If you hold that you have to touch the kazayis b'nameis in one shot, you can't touch and add up your touches. You have to touch it all at one shot. It would not be tummy. Therefore, since originally these individual pieces weren't going to be combined to be metame, lakach ki nami, even if you dissolve them down and now they became one liquid, loy chashav zayis shalem. Why? Kivon shechibur zeh ba'yidei adam. Technically, they're all connected, but this is a man-made connection. They're not naturally one piece, and that's not metame. Frek toisvis v'avagav du revius dam habo mishna meisa metame leman de islay. Right, according to the limit we had at the beginning of Daf Mem Tes Amud Beis from Rabbi Kiva, we said that you can have a revius dam from two mason that's surely joined by man, that's surely not naturally joined together. The oil. Niktumas negia, you can't touch two things. But oil, it's all about being under one oil with this total amount of tumah. Only the gabitumas oil do things combined. If you touch these things, you would not become tumah. V'hada amrina beperek shlishi doilos. Hanageh b'shnei chatzoy zeisim. Minanavela tamei. We have a Mishnah that says if you touch two chatzoy zeisim of nevela you tamei. Here you're telling me when it comes to tumas meis, if you touch two apizaysim, you're not tamei. Well, by nevela you are tamei. Zok toizus yesh leimer the hasamari sheyesh basar merudad b'neim hamachabim yachad. There must be two chatzoy zeisim, a fat, but there must be some type of strand of meat that's joining them, so they're naturally one piece. So now Zok Toisus. So Toisus is telling us huge halachas that we need to know about Tumah. And that is, in order to have Tumah, if you need a certain mass, it has to be one piece that's naturally connected. If it's not naturally connected, rather it's connected by man, that wouldn't allow it to reach a kazayis, l'gabitumas negia, because you're touching two things. Can't combine touching two things. Oil, when you're mal on a kazayis, so the oil combines everything. So that tumah would work. So now the Tosfos taught us over here that by tumah at least, you cannot combine two items to reach a shear. Faktoisus and taimar tivshit mehacha the chibur adam and chibur. Maybe everywhere in Shas, whenever you need a shear, combining it, a human combining it doesn't work. And we'll see in a moment specifically, Lagabi what halacha Tosfos is suggesting this. The Yeshleimer, Hainu Dafka Betumas Meis, Shatuma Ba Mimenu, Litzarfer Likazais, Latameyacher. This rule that we're learning here, that Chibure Adam is in a Chibur, that's if you have something that has its own independent tumah. It's its own tumah. It didn't receive tumah from anywhere else, but it has its own tumah, such as tumas maize, such as tumas nevela. So therefore, if it's davgum tumas maize, tumah bami menel atzarva lechazayis l'tamei achayim ve'av shuliyah shekena kabbalah. Could be that was the kabbalah that we had, that something that has its own tumah, generates its own tumah, like nevela, like maize. There you cannot combine two positions. But this halacha that an oichel can be metama if you have a kabei of oichel, there the tumah is not being generated, it's not emanating from the food. The food can just receive tumah from something else. Just like if there's an isra achila, even if you eat multiple things, it's mitzaref to a kabeya. So therefore, when it comes to tumas oichlin, there are multiple things you could put together, and it will be mitzaref to a kabeya to be mikabel tumah. But things that have their own internally generated tumah, such as nevela, such as tumas mace, it's only if it's naturally combined, not if it's human, if it's combined by man. So now that we have that rule, frag the Gemara. Let's have a look. Chelav ameshu shalem v'tichai tamei hayim aford v'tichai tar. Frag the Gemara. V'sol kedaydach ein nitzuk la'oichlin. If you hold that by oichlin there's no nitzuk, meaning the fact that there are two oichlin touching each other through the liquid, that's not a connection. Well then, shalem v'tichai namilitar. The moment I melt something down, the moment each little bit became liquid, it's now separated from the mass. So you have a big chunk of fat and you put it under fire. It doesn't boom, go instantly into a liquid. The outer layer starts to melt. It's like when you put butter in a pan, and slowly but surely it completely melts. But in the meantime, as every little part comes off of it, if nitzuk is not mechuber, it's disconnected. So how come chelav ameshu shalom v'ticha is coming? Omar Abzeira, Ano, Umar Bered Ravina, Targimna, we explained it that this was a very interesting case. Hacha b'may askinon, kagoin de bahadid de mirsa chlei, solik amuda, there are some who are girls amuda de nura, lepume, the mona, the courage. As this kizayis was going into the keli, it got zapped with fire and it instantly became liquid. So it's not shot slowly but surely it was melting. It got zapped in one shot. The isa kula gabe hadod. Therefore, never were some of this Michael separated by getting dissolved. It all became dissolved together. I'm sorry? Yes, similar to microwave. That's right. So Zok to Gemara, okay, period. So let's have a look at Tosfos, who explains this. Kigoyin ba'ad the marshalei solak amud lepuma demoni. See, Tosfos is not goyus and the amud denura. The amud denura could be the flash of the microwave, right? The kirish the isakula ba'ad gabe kishenosmal gabe. When you put this fat on the fire. Allah kazayis lapuma demona bevasachas mikoyach eish bekirish. What happened is a full kazayis was instantaneously dissolved, and it was all dissolved together. The hash the isay kule gabe adadi. Everything is together. It wasn't dissolving little by little. But tzarich the kirish apuma demona. You have to say that the entire thing dissolved and gelled right at the opening of the keli before it landed. If you're going to say that it dripped down little by little to the bottom of the pot, well then then once again you have to come on to nitzuk. You have to say the whole thing happened in one shot. So you have to say that it happened all in one shot and it all went together. It never got separated. So I don't know how it happened. It must have been very hot in the pot. The moment this kazayas hit the heat, it instantly became a liquid. But the main thing is it was never separate. It always stuck. The kazayas was always stuck together. Yeah, but it probably did gel. Yeah, but whatever, because koresh means the gel. But at the end of the day, it always stuck together. Okay, let's see the Gemara weiter. Amar bin Rashi Tashma. So we're still looking to know if there's a concept of nitzuk by achila, by an oichel. Tashma b'sham yarmim af hamikvah shall grisin v'shall pull mipnei shein tzolden lacharei. So we had a machlokes. What type of foods will you say are mechuber? So the Chachamim said only that honey mixture, which is very, very thick, and Bishamai expanded it even to a mikvah shel grisin, because when you stand the cup up, it pulls some of the stuff back in. So Zok the Gemara, you see clearly here nitzuk chiber. Bishamai af mikvah shel grisin shall pull mipnei shem soldin lachareim. So Zok the Gemara. Alma, you see from here, time of the Shammai, Mishum Riri. So you see over here, forget, you see what's the reason why Beishamai holds it's connected? It's only because of the Riri that pulls it back. Hachanami Mistabra, time of the Tanakama, Mishum Riri. So if that's the case, it would be Mistabra to say that why do the Tanakama say that the honey mixtures are also considered connected? It's only because it pulls back. And the machlokes, the Nakama and Beis Shammai is how thick does it have to be that we consider it pulls back well. The Nakama holds even something really thick like the honey thing, that's called enough pulling back to say that it should be nitzuk chibur in that case. It's not nitzuk, it's thicker. Beis Shammai holds no, even something looser. But the whole machlokes is if you have that feature that it pulls back. But regardless, nitzuk is not chibur. It's just merely a shot of how much riri you need. But you should have arrived from here that unless the oichel has a feature that when you stand it back up, it pulls some of the stuff that's out of the cup back in, there is no chibur. So from the machlokes, Beis Shammai and the Rabbanon, it seems clearly that the whole consideration that it should be connected is only because of riri, and therefore nitzuk is not chibur by oichel. Zok Gemara Lo. Who said that's pshat in the Chachamim? Yeah, you want to say that's pshat in the Chachamim, that they're arguing about to what degree it has to be thick to pull back. Lav davka, immediate area. Maybe Hasa Mishum Desmich, Nasha Mishum Ri. Maybe the Tanakama has their own reason why the honey mixtures are considered connected, and maybe that's because they're thick, and therefore maybe it would apply to other foods. And Hacha Mishum Ri, Beis Shammai holds it's because of Riri. But Avada, maybe the Chachamim hold that the reason why the honey was connected is because it's thick, and not only because it pulls back. And therefore, we still could have a shaila, we still could entertain the shaila if we say nitzuk chibur by oichel. Okay, so that's the next shaila. Now we have another shaila. I understand it pulls back. Springs back, so maybe Shalom is like the Maluchim, they spring, right? Okay, let's see. Well, it could be that's what it's lens. You recoil. You recoil. Okay, let's see the Gemara about it. I didn't know it's late. Valmola Tarvid record. The Chamesh Yurei. How much is a Mola Tarvid record? A spoonful. How much is a spoonful? Zok Gemara Chizki Amar Molei Pieces Ayad. Molei Pieces Ayad means, if you look at Toises, it tells you from your fingers until the arm. So basically, from where your finger connects to your hand until your wrist, which fits only into the palm of your hand. That's what Rav Chisda said, and Rabbi Yochanan said. That's what Chizkiah said. Rabbi Yochanan said Molei Chatnav, no, his full handful, including his fingers. Now we learned Molei Tavid Rekav Sharmu Yeshna Mi Ikar Tzbois Ulamal Divrei Meir. Ikar Tzbois Ulamayla would mean pashtus, from the place where his fingers end till where his fingers start, which means not the palm of his hand, but only the finger area. That's what the shita of Reb Meir is. That's the Reb Meir. It's the full handful. So Bishlam Rabbi Yochanan, who Damak Rabbanan, Rabbi Yochanan holds like the Rabbanan holds Malach Chavna. Elachizkiya, who said it means what's in the palm of his hand, Keman, like Reb Meir, like Rabbanan. Because Reb Meir holds that it's the stuff that's only in his fingers, not in his palm. And he says it's the stuff that's in his palm, only in his fingers. Zok Gemara, it's not shver. Army Malik Pisayat, Umalik Sharetz Boisov Lamaila Chachiruhu. The same amount that you can carry in your palm, you can carry in your fingers. So it's the same amount. It adds up. Perfect. So nobody's proving it because you fold your fingers over, it covers your palm. Very good. Pashut. Hapam oidis Hashem. So Zok the Gemara, Amalei Rabsimi bar Adal or Papa. Maybe you didn't even understand what Reb Meir is saying. Maybe Mimai Dahai Mikishri et Boisav Lamaila. Leroish Dum Lamata Mididei. Davel Mala Pisayat. How do you know that when Reb Meir said, how do you know that when Reb Meir said, it means towards his wrist, maybe it means towards his fingers. And therefore it's exactly the same thing that Chizkiah said. Right, so who said it means from the tip of his fingers to the base of his fingers, maybe it means to the base of his fingers to his wrist. Maybe they both mean exactly the same thing. Teku doesn't really fit in there. It just means it's for effort that it stems good that Chizkiah can hold like a mayor. Okay, we'll stop here and we'll be mamshuk tomorrow. Today is the Yutzat of Rebbe Melech.